SUP. No, SUP. As in the SUP01 Lian-Li case we're going to look at today. The ViewSonic X24K LED projector is the world's first projector designed for Xbox consoles. Featuring screen sizes up to 120 inches, native refresh rates up to 240 Hz, built-in Harman Kardon speakers, and low latency gaming modes, the X24K gaming projector from ViewSonic delivers a truly customizable experience for both gaming and HDR cinema. To see our full-length video covering features and user experiences, follow the links in the description below. Okay, I know we've all been dying for something different, and Lian-Li never ceases to disappoint. No, wait. They never fail.
To amaze.
They make good stuff, okay? So, that's just whatever. I'm almost out of here and I'm feeling it. So this is the SUP01 case, which is actually kind of built on the premise of like the Lian-Li 216, which has been incredibly popular. But this just is a complete, they took everything about a PC case and just threw it out the window and said, let's start over. So everything in this case is exactly the opposite of what you would sort of expect. What I mean by that is, there are no intake fans on the front whatsoever. Your GPU is supposed to do that for you. Yes, the GPU would be vertically mounted long ways in the front of the case so its fans can bring the air in. The back side of the case has a exhaust for the hot air through the GPU, but also an intake on the other side to bring in air through the AIO, and the AIO doesn't get mounted anywhere you can see it. It's on the back side. So it's like they took the whole motherboard tray concept that Lian-Li sort of kicked off the craze with like the 011, and went, we're tired of doing it that way. We're gonna do it this way now. Another thing that's nice about this case is the fact that everything on it is 100% toolless. So if, hey, it's a mirror down there. The glass is really thick too, by the way, like super thick. The only reason we even care about glass thickness is because of breakability, like how durable is it? So as you can see, the edges are protected. There is foam on there, but the glass thickness itself is 4.25 millimeters. It's pretty thick. I thought it was about 4 mils thick. It's a little bit thicker than that even. Now stay tuned in this video. I am gonna do a smoke test on this. I wanna see the airflow through this because we have fans kind of facing all different directions in here. So I'm really curious as to how this one is going to fare. Anyway, the top should just pop off. Yep. And every panel on this case is mesh. Now the porosity on this is pretty fine, and we do have a very thick fan filter inside as well. So one of the reasons why I want to do the airflow test on this with the smoke is I really want to see how well does this ventilate / stop dust from getting in. Is it going to ventilate really well, or is it going to trade off filterability for airflow? So I'm really curious about that. One thing you might notice here too is we have this riser cable. It's sort of kind of like how the Height Y70 has these half-height expansion slots right here. So the GPU, because it mounts to the front, uses this PCIe riser cable, which should be a Gen 4 at minimum, might be a Gen 5, we'll take a look. Which means any expansion cards that you have on your motherboard here, whether it be a capture card or a sound card or a network card or because I know a lot of people have to run 10G network cards because not a lot of motherboards have them built in unless you go with like a productivity grade board. They better be low profile, like home theater PC height. Otherwise, you're not gonna be able to use it. So that's already a kind of a downside about the trade-off of going with a narrow chassis like this. Like the first thing I said when I opened this, or I picked up this box to Nick was, the box is heavier than I expected it to be, given the fact that it's like, the chassis is only a little bit smaller than say a Lian-Li 216 is, but this is heavier. Like the build quality and construction of this guy is like, there's no flexing or creaking in this at all. It's just mesh. I mean, look at that. It's just mesh. It's like people went, you want mesh? Fine. Here's your motherfucking mesh. So the 3 fans that are included are on the backside right here. These are 1800 RPM fans. It's just standard 12 volt fan. But they, as you can see, these are exhausting air out this way. And I don't know if you can tell, there's also a spot right here where we can put 3 more 120s or 2 140s. So we could fit a 360, a 240, or a 280 right here. This is where your AIO goes. The AIO goes on the backside right here. And what this fan is designed to do is we're pushing air in right through the AIO. So the AIO goes in here, but the fans have to go obviously on the inside. So it's gonna get very crammed right there. Some of the air is gonna get positive pressured out the back. And then these fans are gonna pick up that hot air from the AIO and exhaust it back out. So hopefully we don't get too much of a cyclone effect right here where it's just picking hot air back up and can rise. But as long as your chassis is in an open area, not stuck in like a computer cabinet or like a, you know, some people like old desks have a little door, you put the PC in there that has terrible airflow. As long as you're not doing something like that, this should be okay. But until we actually build something in here and put it under load testing, it'll be hard to say. But I think it'll be okay depending on the CPU you go with. Bottom compartment down here, you can see obviously this is where your power supply goes. Got our drive sleds here for our 3.5-inch drives. Well, one of them anyway. And then this whole thing is completely removable and adjustable. So this is the extended piece here. If you put another 2.5-inch or a 3.5-inch drive, so you got two of those. Or this entire thing can come out, and then we have a full open bottom to manage our wires. This top piece right here is removable. So we've got two screws there and a screw there. This top piece comes off, which makes it easier when you're routing like your AIO and stuff. So the AIO pump is designed to come up, over, through here, and down to your CPU. So you should have tubes that just go up into there. So it's not completely toolless because some of the stuff internal-wise obviously has screws. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and take off this top piece right here because I am gonna throw some components in here. Because you might have noticed, the only 3 fans on this case are on the backside right here. So this little mounting mechanism down here on the bottom is adjustable. We have height adjustable ability built in, as well as forward and back adjustability. So we can go up and down, front to back, or I guess that'd be side to side, and then front to back available on there. That way we can get our GPU fans as close to the mesh as possible. So I'm really curious as to whether or not GPU fans themselves are capable of pulling in enough positive pressure, or at least just enough pressure period, to pull air in. So that means I'm gonna have to do at least a quick build in this. Otherwise I'm gonna have no way of like turning on that GPU, those GPU fans and getting them going. There's also a fan that attaches to the back of this, and I'll show you that in a second. To me, it really does seem a little bit like an afterthought. You mount a 120 fan in here, which is not included. Here's all your spare parts and mounting screws and stuff for hard drives and whatnot. Anyway, you can mount a 120 fan to this. And then what you do is you mount it, there's 2 holes here, and you mount it like this, and then you can adjust this side to side. And this is intended to blow air in the backside. The reason why you blow air in is they're talking about this being the active cooling air that blows across you, or VRMs and stuff, which is a little weird considering those are up here. So once you take the top piece off, which I did right here, then this piece comes free entirely. And it has these little like rubber nubbins right here. Now the rubber pieces here are designed to attenuate any of the vibrations that could make its way through the chassis. So these are just kind of like some rubber isolators that just have screws going through them. So when you put it back in, make sure the fan wire is clear, place it down in there, and then you can put it back in there and tighten it down. So the fans that are in here though, as you can see, they are kind of proprietary. They've got this kind of a mini connector on there that then converts it to a standard 4-pin PWM. And the same one exists on the top if you want to daisy chain it if you get more of these fans. So if you were to use more of these fans, say for the AIO, you could have all 6 of them speed up and slow down together with whatever fan controller these are plugged into. Otherwise, if you have them in 2 separate headers, you're going to want to tune these fans to speed up and slow down together because this is part of the cooling for the AIO. It's intended to take this chamber right here and sort of isolate it from the rest of the system. And then for the AIO bracket, it's the same sort of deal. Rubber isolators on the bottom, screw on the side once you take the top off, and then the whole bracket comes off so that you can mount your AIO to that. Single plug front panel connector. Every time a case does this, I love this because it makes it so much easier for beginners to just know where the cables go because you plug it in one way. It's like a USB. You can see how there's one blocked out pin. So as long as you pay attention to how you're lining it up, you always know your power is on power, and hard drive LEDs and reset switch are all lined up appropriately. And in terms of front panel, we have the usual suspects. We have our ARGB link wire, which is going to connect to a motherboard so that you can have the lighting on the case be controlled by either the motherboard or the built-in controller, our HD audio front panel connectors, USB-C, and our USB 3.0. So speaking of lighting real quick, there's 3 places you have lighting on here. You have an LED strip right here in the front, this little white plastic piece, which is separate from this piece on the side. So that's a separate device technically, that's a separate device technically. And then we have one built in right here into the riser cable. So you have the very subtle, very thin strip lighting built into the case. It's like kind of tasteful. It's not completely like in your face. Now the other thing we have right here on the top to support our GPU, which does support, so size-wise, 4-slot, which is nice because typically you want to make sure you have enough space between the side of the case and the fan so you don't choke it off. Now the whole point is get the fans as close as we can to the mesh without being so close that we get a turbulent sound with the fans being too close. But 4-slot wide. In this particular config, 380 mil length is supported. You can drop this down to the lower compartment down here, as you can see. It's on the top compartment, but you can lower it all the way down there and gain an extra 20 millimeters of support. Part of the front fan will probably be blocked by this. They do show that in the photo, but you can support up to 400 millimeter cards. So I've got the motherboard in, I've got the riser cable in. You're limited to water cooling with this case. It's intended for an AIO because there's no way you're getting any, even low height cooler on this without going super small, which would limit the CPU you can go with. Underneath the glass panel on the bottom is a spot for 2.5 inch SATA drives right here. That's underneath the mirror, which is a true mirror. It's like very glass. And then this literally just can go back in once you put drives down there in the bottom like that. And then one screw keeps it in right there. Everything through this is unconventional. And I think that's kind of what we're all a little hungry for some unconventional right now. And I think logically while building it, motherboard first, CPU later. Well, CPU can go in with the motherboard, but CPU cooler next, I think is the next logical thing to do. So let me figure out what cooler I want to put in here that isn't going to require me to install 46 different controllers. Maybe I'll just go with one of their Galahads. I have a few of those. So this is the GA2 Trinity Performance 360 AIO from Lian-Li. Not sponsored. They did not ask me to put this in there. I'm just curious now because this is a big boy. This is not your average AIO. This sucker is thick. It's got like their P28 fans on here, I believe, something similar to that. It's got a thicker than average AIO. And you only have so much space to use with this. I do like the fact that we have the angled fittings right here. This is actually really nice. And they rotate. Holy cow. That's probably counterproductive to what I need to do with this. Wait, unless I have to do the up? I don't know. This is... All right, so I got this big old chungus of an AIO to fit. They do have a little like strap right here that's supposed to be for, I think, tubing if it's long enough, but this tubing doesn't reach over to there. And I had to like bring the tubing around the bottom because it made more sense to have it without like being stuck up and bowed up on the top or in the way of hitting the side panel down here by having the fittings on the right and then loop under itself. Top of the radiator is still above the pump by quite a bit, so we don't have to worry about any air collecting in the pump. And then the two wires are actually on the top right here with the way I have it oriented. That way it can kind of, I just sort of crudely zip tied those together and stuck them out of the way. If you look on this plane, you can see they did account for the height of their big cooler. It will clear, where's the glass? Because that would be a bad look for Lian-Li if they didn't support their own like flagship AIO. So it does look good in there though. Like we were talking about it right now as I'm kind of building this, that we do like the narrowness of the chassis. We just have to really see now how well that front can intake with the GPU only, but the fans are fairly close. I would say there's probably 30 millimeters between the fan and the back of the motherboard. But guess what? The back of the motherboard is now being actively cooled, technically, because that air does have to bounce off of it before the other fans can exhaust it. But this is the first time I've seen a case company really sort of prioritize, let's make a chamber for the most part designed for just the CPU. Now it's not fully isolated. There's no wall right here separating anything happening here for what's happening there. But 3 fans in, 3 fans out, for the most part, we have its own kind of isolated area here. As long as this is not continuing to just suck hot air back in and cycle it around and then get hotter and hotter on the AIO. I would have to assume Lian-Li tested that. So it's where the adjustability is really nice because of where I have it. I don't think it's perfectly centered anyway. The riser cable's sticking out slightly. So I can loosen up that screw, that screw. This GPU has the server mount screws on the back, which I actually found line up perfectly with that groove right there. They might even mention it in the manual. I didn't even notice. So I took the little rubbery feet off that are designed to just clamp on there. And yeah, I've already got some scratches in this GPU from that screw, but I find this is going to be far more secure to do it this way There. Now it's rigid mounted, and that's not going anywhere. So I would prefer to do that, honestly. All right, so everything's fully wired up in here right now. I've got the 600 watt, 12 volt power coming down here into the PSU. So this area right here kind of gets a little tight and cluttery, if you will. There's Velcro straps to hold down the cables, which do a good enough job. It's just you have to make sure that you don't have any cables pushing into the fan blades on either the AIO or the exhaust fan here. Fortunately, there is plenty of room in here. So if I tilt this down, you can see down in there, there's a pretty decent amount of room in there. As long as you kind of plan ahead as you're going, because this is one of those builds where you sort of have to Jenga it together as you go to make sure you can access everything at the right time. So the order of operations I did was motherboard in there first, then figured out the orientation for my AIO, mounted the pump, mounted the AIO bracket back here and put it in. Then I did my most of my wiring first before even the GPU. Then I did GPU. Now I'm going to do rear fan here, which I have to plug into a header. Those are going to be the coldest wires that have ever existed, according to Phil. When I took this off and I left it off, mostly because this goes right behind the CPU socket, they call it a controller mount. So it's just a place for you to be able to double-side sticky tape any sort of RGB or fan controller that you may have. Lian-Li obviously has their L-Connect stuff, so they would want to make sure they support that. But I took it off because now I'm going to have airflow blowing directly on the back of the CPU socket as well, which will, believe it or not, provide a significant amount of additional cooling. I think more cases should really start considering how much airflow they're providing to the back of the case. So I kind of pre-zip tied these down and they're really tight on the other side, and I didn't think about where the actual pass-throughs are. So now I've got to loosen, I got to make some slack on the back side here. There. So be mindful of those. I wasn't, so now I'm dealing with it. Also too, Lian-Li's manual shows that this is intended to just be able to let it flop back there like that. I wouldn't do that with the AIO, at least not this AIO, because it's so heavy. With the fans, it's fine, but just keep that in mind. Like, that is intended for you to be able to do that. I wouldn't keep it like that while you're working on it. I think it's too easy to bend the metal. But yeah, they intend that to be the case. So there's one very unfortunate thing that they did not provide with this case. That would have been an extension cable to go from the GPU to maybe something mounted back here that you could plug in an HDMI or a display port. Kind of like they do with power supplies on ITX cases where they have a cable to bring it there. Because this plug right here is intended for you to pass through your HDMI or display port or whatever. If you have the cage right here with your drives in there, it's nearly impossible to plug this in, but then it's actually not that hard. It's easy. See? Easy. Anyway, this is only like a 3-meter cable. It eats up like a good chunk of it. That's the PSU fan hitting something. So this is a brand new P13011 1300 watt from Inwin. That's the fan. How does this make it through QC? This is the other one. Tomorrow on Gamers Nexus. So Phil suggested that I just like whack it to try and knock the blade back in because he thinks the hub's slightly off. I hit it a little too hard. It's all dented in now. But it's better. A couple things I haven't pointed out yet. They do have these Velcro straps in the back to help cable manage like your USB devices and stuff. I'm not going to use it because I'm just testing it. Also too, the power and reset button on the front is actually the Lian-Li logo. So the Lian is the power button and the Li is the reset button. Hey. And now our RGB is working because while I was in there, I took care of plugging this wire back in, which as I said, makes this rear exit, which is weird. It's like an afterthought, but okay. Okay, so check this out. That's our temperature for the socket up in the top right corner displaying on the MSI Carbon motherboard. It is accurate. It's showing 27, 26, 27 on the package and mid to low 20s on the E-cores and P-cores. It is also running at only like 1.1 gigahertz right now because the power profile and stuff. I have no idea. This motherboard, I have not updated the BIOS. It's brand new. I bought this for the test bench so that I could put a better motherboard on the test bench after I got rid of the ASUS stuff. I have no idea what the power profile stuff is set to this. It's a 14700K though. So let's just go ahead and do an initial test right here. Just start it and see what my temps spike to. 83, 89, 91. It's at 290 watts. So it definitely has the above Intel spec profile set right now, which I guess is a good thing if we're really gonna test this right now, because it's now pulling as many more watts than a 900K would, like a 14900K, 96, 97. It's still at 300 watts. It's at 5.5 gigahertz all core. So it does have a pretty aggressive natural power limit adjustment that MSI has applied. That's also a 35,175. You know what's funny about this? This 14700K is performing faster than the 14900K in the i500 in this chassis. I mean, it makes sense, it's got this giant cooler on it and it's overclocked. And the 14900K down in that system was running all the way down to 200 watts. So there's our 100C right there. I don't blame the chassis for this. This is the design of the motherboards pushing the CPUs too far. Okay, let me get L-Connect installed so I can get this cooler operating properly. Okay, so now that I have the L-Connect software installed, the fans will do something. They basically sat there at idle, just idle, really slow temp the entire time. I also have gone into the BIOS and limited the CPU to its Intel performance profile of 253 watts. It was set to 4096. This board has clearly not been updated with any of the BIOS changes that all the Intel fiasco has come from. Now that we've got this all set, now I can go ahead and start our initial cooling run right now to see how well see, as I'm loading things now, I can hear the fans starting to speed up. I can also feel air coming out the top. That means those intake fans, being as like big and thick as they are, I do believe is going to be creating a fairly positive pressure. So I have to make sure that those aren't overpowering the GPU intakes. It's be a balancing act at this point, because we don't have a standard flow direction through this. We have three separate compartments. We have the CPU compartment on the back, technically, the GPU on the front, and the power supply on the bottom. So we've got three areas of airflow that are not sealed off from each other. So you could easily overpower one. Okay, let's set this to a 30-minute test. Hit start. What are we gonna spike up to now with realistic numbers? 81C, 80C, and the fans kicked up. I don't know if you can hear them. The fans absolutely kicked up. And I have those fans have a toggle on them for high speed, which is 3,200 RPM, or low speed, which is like, I think 2,200 or 2,400 RPM. And then in the Lian-Li software, I have it set to high speed. So I think that's a bit loud for my preference. Then we'll put them back to standard speed. There, now they're slowing down a little bit. But even at 252 watts, there we go. We're at 83, 85, 83. We're at 5.3 gigahertz all core now, which is much more realistic for 14700K. All right, let's let this run for a bit. Let's see what it caps out at. And then let's hook it up to some smoke. Not the blue magic smoke, hopefully, just smoke so we can see the airflow. Okay, so it's been looping and looping and looping and looping for a long time. This is actually the next day, it's still looping. No, anyway, they did hit upper 90s and spike 100 like for a moment somewhere. It's not doing it now, as you can see, but at somewhere it did that. More than likely it's when it restarts the test. More importantly though, none of these numbers are red. There's a difference between hitting 100C and then hitting 100C with it being red. Red means it hard throttled. This is saying it's like probably barely bumping that, but I still would like to see these temps be lower than that, honestly. Now, all the fan filters and everything are still on this, and I think if I took those off, that would help quite a bit. Check out our GPU temperature right now. I do have a GPU fan curve right now set to the user profile right here. So it's not going 0 RPM, it's currently at 40%. It's currently at 27C and 36.2C right now on the hotspot and stuff. So it's not terrible, but check this out. At one point it did reach 43C and 52C. Now the reason for that is that was when it was actually sitting under 0 RPM. I just started up MSI Afterburner, which then forced the fan to turn on. Also too, I do have the fan filters in, just wanna show that. I am curious though, if I were to, let's say, just take out the rear fan filter, or let's just, oh, you know what? Is there even one in here? Okay, there's not even one in here. So the only way I'd be able to make the temperatures any better whatsoever would be to take the whole side panel off altogether. So this is like the worst possible scenario right now, where it is under Cinebench load, which is much harder than any type of load would be during gaming and stuff. So I'm gonna stop the CPU test now. Temp should drop down pretty quick. Yeah, 40, 36, 35. So it's a pretty beefy AIO though. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna start a Port Royal loop, because now we need to see what's gonna happen with the GPU. Because these fans on the back are only speeding up and slowing down based on CPU load. So I need to see now what's gonna happen if we have the GPU now bringing in hot air. I have a feeling though the fans on the back are still gonna have no problems exhausting that, but I wanna see what our overall GPU temps are gonna look like. So we pretty much capped out at 60 as our max temp, 71.6 on the hotspot. Currently it's at 59 and 70.1, 58. It's gonna kind of hover up there, coming up and down because the fan speeds up slowly and then slows down. It's like right on a change where the temperature / fan speed is. But I got my FLIR camera. I wanna show you something interesting. If we look at the front of the case, you can see it's clearly very cool because that's where the cool air is being sucked in through these vents right here. But look at the back. So you can clearly see where the GPU is. So it's seeing the GPU itself, but you can actually see the flow of hot air because we got the flow through up here on the top. So the flow through, remember, they all have like an amount of air that can go through the cooler. And because that's flowing straight through, this top fan of the 3 is exhausting it. Our temp is still 59, so that's pretty solid. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna just take the filter out, and I wanna see if the temp goes down at all. It's only been a couple minutes since I took the filter out, and it's at 56 currently, but there we go, 55. It's actually dropping, and I didn't change the fan curve at all. All I did was take the filter out. I personally don't think you would need to run the filter. That's just me, only because of the fact that it's such fine mesh already on the front that I think a lot of the dust would be captured by that. Now it's at 54. And the crazy thing about that is that's gonna be enough temperature to actually maybe get you a boost bin or 2 back. All right, we need some visualization now. Let's go ahead and get our smoke machine ready. I don't recommend doing this because this is basically like super vaping near your computer. We're not gonna be doing it all the time, so it's not gonna harm anything, but I want some visualization of the smoke. And I gotta leave our test running here for our GPU because I wanna see what's happening with our GPU. And then we're gonna put our CPU back under load with the rear fans kind of doing their thing. Because my biggest concern here is going to be whether or not my AIO is picking up air that's being exhausted right here. So I'm wondering if when I put the smoke machine here, am I gonna see part of it going in there and coming out here and going right back into there? That's what I wanna see, is it doing this right here? Okay, so first and foremost, this should just obviously being sucked in the front. Yep, there it is right there. Our GPU is current, oh, look at that. You can see it. You can see the fans doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They're just immediately exhausting it out. But look, the GPU's coaxial fans is actually pushing it out. And then up here, okay, that's enough smoke. You can see it's coming out more forceful because that exhaust fan is pushing it. But down here, it's a little bit more radiant and slower because that's the GPU fan pushing it. And my question is, what's happening on the top right now? It's just sort of floating there, not really doing anything. So not too much positive pressure pushing it out. And you can see just how well the GPU is pulling in that air. Look at that. Look how far away that is. And the GPU is pulling that in no problem at all. Okay. When did Snoop Dogg come over? Okay, we need to do the CPU one now. So you can see the AIO is clearly pulling it in. See that? And then you can see here, the exhaust is clearly, oh, look at that. You know what? My biggest concern was whether or not, so the exhaust is definitely pushing it far away. The intake is not picking it up. So look at this. Look at that. So my fears are unfounded that they are not picking it up, but that's idle speeds. What about under load though, when these fans kick up and go real fast? So you can see now they are really moving some air right now. Look at the exhaust. Woo! The exhaust is just like... So what I'm looking for here is how much of this smoke is making it back to there. Now some is, if you look down this way, Phil, it's really obvious that there's a split. Okay. So you can see some of that smoke is making its way back to the intake, but not much. Not much at all. Like right here is, but most of it's still making its way away. I mean, it's picking up some of it, but look at that. Most of it is still making its way away. And those are much faster fans on the intake than on the exhaust. So it's actually not doing too bad. It feels like a super, the kind of case you would see with like a SI or something. It's got a super version of like this guy right here. Remember this was the Omen case that we did a little build in? It's like a super version of this, but better. I love its narrow footprint. I love the unconventional way of mounting the GPU. You saw the GPU was clearly getting a ton of cold air. I mean, it maxed out at 60 with the filter on, 55 with the filter off. The rear is not sucking in hot air coming back through, at least not enough of it to matter, as you saw with the visualization of the hot and cold smoke, if you will. Our test showed that, yeah, the 14700K can get up into the 90s, but that's just the nature of having an AIO on Intel these days. At full 253 watts, I didn't let it throttle down at all. I think it's a pretty solid case, and the price on it isn't too bad either. It's $149. You get those 3 exhaust fans. The other fans obviously will be a part of the AIO. Your GPU is your front exhaust fans. I did not put on the rear exhaust. And I feel like this is the worst possible situation where I didn't put on rear exhaust. And to be honest, they call it an intake. I think I would have had it as an exhaust to pull some of the GPU intake air through, I guess, to try and go across the components. But in the whole time I had Cinebench running here, looking at my PCH temps, they maxed out at 53. So I think we're doing okay on the temperatures. Like our RAM, it's 35C, it maxed out at 47.8. I'm just happy to see something that is just different from the normal status quo of a case. You guys have been asking for like people to innovate and come up with something different. I think Lian-Li has done a fantastic job with this case, no pun intended. As far as we can tell, visualization with thermal testing and our actual component testing, and then seeing how the smoke does, there's enough data here to be able to say that the design is working, which is nice. All right, there you go. Sound off down in the comments below how you feel about this. I guess now is where you would want a big giant GPU, because that's your intake. Sound off down below. I think it's cool. No pun intended, mostly.